Right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to this discussion that is hosted by Access Partnerships, Metaverse Policy Labs. This is the centralized versus decentralized discussion around should the metaverse be built on a centralized or decentralized platform. So if you have joined the link and this isn't the thing that you signed up for, this is the wrong class, please walk down the hallway and go into the right class with the right professors, because we will be talking about the metaverse and the centralized and decentralized platform. I'm going to give everybody, all of our participants, a little while longer a couple more minutes to log in. Uh, Sometimes it can get a little bit tricky to enter into the Teams platform, so we will be doing that. But in the meantime, I'd like to invite all of you to play around with the controls. And if you are able to, and if you want to, or if you're so inclined to, please do click on the chat function. You can actually chat within the discussion, and I would encourage you to, given the fact that it's quite difficult to network on a virtual platform, feel free to introduce yourself on the platform here to each other so that you can get to know each other as well. So please feel free to do that as we give everybody perhaps a minute more to sign in, and then we will get started with our speakers. Thank you very much for your patience. All right, it's 2 minutes past the hour, and I think that let us get started. My name is Mei Ann. I am the director of the Fairtech Institute over at Access Partnership, and we're the host for this discussion. The Metaverse Policy Labs is where we've been experimenting for the last year, talking about and sort of trying to demystify the different aspects of the metaverse. And today we arrive at this question around centralization and decentralization of the metaverse, because we've spoken around some of the decentralized blockchain ledger technologies, and people are asking, hold on, that's all very, very interesting for decentralization, but there are still centralized control mechanisms around these technologies. So what exactly are we talking about when we're talking about building the next version of the metaverse? Can we actually legitimately ask the question, should the metaverse be built on a centralized or decentralized platform, or is that just a non-starter? And today we have with us three luminaries from around the world here. Professor Nassim Naqvi, who is the president of the British Blockchain Association, Mr. David Palmer, who is the blockchain lead for Vodafone, and Ms. Lisa Gus, who is the CEO and co-founder of Wishnish. So thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us today. I'd like to give the time to you to just really kickstart the discussion with Lisa first. Please introduce yourself, your work, your organization. Tell us, do you think the metaverse and distributed technologies truly promise decentralization of the metaverse? What do you think this looks like? So introductions first. Lisa, over to you, then David, and then Prof. Nafi.
Absolutely, and a great question to start with, Lim. Thank you. So my name is Lisa Gas. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wishnish. We're a decentralized ledger technology company, and we're pretty much providing tech for the government and enterprise sector, pretty much on the level of infrastructure. And I think that actually leads me into your question, because to me, decentralization needs to be at the cornerstone, at the infrastructure layer of the metaverse. It's already global, and I think the need to provide global identity, but at the same time, an ability to stay, relevant across the different ecosystems. It's really important. Additionally, what decentralization can do is make sure that metaverse can remain, participants and corners of the metaverse can continue to remain online regardless of, say, political climate, etc. And I think that's where the decentralization needs to come in.
Thanks, Lisa. And in terms of Wishnish, how does that contribute to that aspect of things?
Well, we are really creating the ecosystem for multiple nodes to exist and to be able to work jointly together to provide a framework, almost like a new TCP/IP protocol for Web3. And so if you're creating this relevance across multiple ecosystems, I think that's the beginning of the metaverse. On top of which we can start with the AR, VR, interactivity, social networking, or potentially commercial aspects of the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. It sounds like that it's the technical layer of the Web3 technologies that you're looking at, and that's where the interconnectivity and interoperability, I would say, is definitely bound to start with. David, perhaps you'd like to also introduce yourself and do the same as well. Tell us about what you do and your opinions on centralization and decentralization.
Hi, thank you, Lim. So I am the blockchain lead for Vodafone. I'm also looking actively broader at the Web3 toolset, and I'm also co-founder of a platform called the Digital Asset Broker, which is a IoT economy of things platform, but has a decentralized layer to it. So in terms of the metaverse and should it be decentralized or centralized, I think we're going through an evolution on that topic. So what we saw last year, and I think a lot of it relates to what is the metaverse, right? So I think we can't answer that question until we understand what the metaverse is. Is the metaverse the next iteration of the internet as we know it? Is it something more profound? Is the metaverse an operating system? Is the metaverse infrastructure? Is it a framework? Is it a layer one? So to speak. So I think we've got to investigate all of those, and I don't think we know yet. What we do know about the metaverse is that there's immersive experiences associated with it. We know that it's about ecosystems, about joining up those ecosystems, about portability and interoperability. We know that it will give rise to new business models. We know that it will give rise to new experiences, and it will fundamentally change the value and what we can do in the new online called the metaverse. In terms of whether it should be decentralized or centralized, I think that that's the process. And I think if we look at it, the Kickstarter has been actually centralized, right? Because even a lot of the Web3 protocols, the layer ones, etc., goes through centralized APIs now, right? So even in the most decentralized protocol, you'll find that there's centralized components. So I think there's a battle for the heart of the metaverse that's been going on since last year when Meta announced. And the social media companies, which are Web2 companies and platform companies, can bring millions of users. I think there's over 3 billion users on social media. Facebook, Meta, Instagram, and these guys want to somehow start issuing NFTs and integrating immersive technologies. Then you'd have to concede that the first stage and the first milestone to the evolution of the internet will be Web2. However, if you look further and you look at some of the developments that are coming from Web3, interoperable self-sovereign identity, NFTs, DAOs, voting, communities, you can see that they're probably more aligned with the ideal of where the metaverse needs to go. Given the fact that the metaverse will need governance, that if the metaverse is to be a place where we need to work and have our businesses and go to work, and it becomes a universal right, then you need policy to make sure that there's redistribution, that there's equal access, etc. And to have something so important in the hands of a few tech companies would not work, right? So I think the initial adoption will be Web 2 or Web 2.5 as we're seeing now. I think it will move towards a more decentralized structure at a governmental and a micro level as we progress. So that's a long answer, but I think it's a complicated question.
It is a complicated question, and you started right from a great question, which is really what is the metaverse? Because Lisa definitely started it just now with talking about, well, we know we're working on this infrastructure layer and the technical layer, and say, okay, well, that's one aspect of it. But you've introduced now this. I like the phrase, battle for the heart of the introvert of the metaverse, where you indeed we have started from the Web 2 companies. I'll tell you a funny story, and to everybody as well. I remember talking to some of my students in class about Web3 technologies, and everybody's like, hold up, we're in Web3 already. What happened to Web2 and what's Web1 again? You say, why was this the case? Um, so absolutely, I think that definitely we're going to be moving into a little bit more of a decentralized structure. Um, I think that it's definitely we're in a position of tension right now. Whether or not we're at the beginning, the start, the middle, the end of the journey, I'm not quite sure. But I want to present the time now to Professor Natli, who is definitely at the forefront of a lot of the policy changes which you referred to, David. So, Professor Natli, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for very kind invitation. I'm very glad that these discussions are happening with all stakeholders. Something that we have become slightly better, I think, at this time round in Web3. Unfortunately, these discussions didn't happen in back in 2005, 2006 at the time of Web2. So congratulations to all of you who are involved in this. Um, um, I'm Naseem Naqvi. I'm the founder and president of the British Blockchain Association and UK National Honor recipient for services to blockchain and Web3 in the United Kingdom and beyond. Um, I'm also the author of the UK's National Blockchain Roadmap, one of the 9 countries that have published their blockchain roadmap in the world. And last year, we became one of the world's first blockchain industry associations to establish our metaverse headquarters. We are present in 2 metaverses, Decentraland and Spatial. So, your question about decentralization of the metaverse, I think the question we have to ask is decentralization of what exactly? Um, to me, decentralization means 3 important things. Number one, permissionless access, permissionless creation, and permissionless transactions. So access, creation, and transaction. So ACT, easy way to remember, as a visitor to the space. So you have the ability to read, write, and own. Number two, which is very important, and the other speakers have also alluded to, is the interoperability. So as a user, I should be able to connect some form of a blockchain wallet to my metaverse and then be in control for those assets. If I want, I can receive those assets, so I'm in control. And this is particularly important in a creator economy for content creators, because the your wealth, your influence will become trapped if you are in a centralized walled garden, and the digital value that you have created is not transferable. So it will not be of benefit to the wider economic system. And the third and the most important is the self sovereignty and autonomy. And when we talk about self sovereignty and autonomy, we talk about communication, your history, your identity, your data, digital assets, entitlements, rights, and social contacts. And again, I'm a teacher, I'm an academic. Easy way to remember this is CHIDDERS, CHIDDERS: communication, history, identity, data, digital assets, entitlements, rights, and social contacts. So, in an open, decentralized metaverse, interoperability is the key. And I think this is best achieved currently through distributed ledgers, such as blockchain. um, I should be able to connect, for example, a MetaMask wallet to Decentraland, and then simultaneously connect to Sandbox and Axie Infinity and other blockchain-based metaverses, and then be able to transfer my NFTs and other assets seamlessly from one platform to another. So I think, in a nutshell, this is what I believe the decentralization of metaverses. And we have research and data to back this. People spend 10 times more on a blockchain based metaverse game that allows users to transfer their assets out of their platform compared to a non-blockchain based metaverse. So we have seen even in our real life, closed economies do far worse than open economies. So I think a metaverse, a decentralized metaverse, but as David said, it's just the beginning. Decentralization is a spectrum. Things can start centralized, but then gradually become decentralized and more open and more transparent and governed by DAO, etc. So yeah, I mean, this is where we are at the moment.
Thanks, Professor. I love the fact that you indeed are one of those professors who helps the students remember the concepts with the acronyms ACTS, and the other one is chitters. Is that what you
That's
mentioned?
right. CHIDDERS, CHIDDERS, communication, history, identity, data, digital assets, entitlements, rights, and social contacts.
I'm a Singaporean student. I love these acronyms because they help me score really well. the I think that that's the permissions that you mentioned, the interoperability that you mentioned, and the fact that we are indeed just at the beginning. I think we are just starting to build the concepts of what Web3 is and what the metaverse can possibly be. And I want to recognize that Brad Brown, who is one of our participants, he's actually asked, I think, one of those leading questions when we're imagining what the metaverse should be. When we think about sustainability, other concerns with the amount of data a worldwide blockchain is going to replicate over the course of 50 years, if we need to maintain a history of everything, doesn't this grow exponentially over time? It is quite true. This is one of those challenges. I'm going to pause our conversation right now and see if any of our speakers has anything to respond to Brad at this moment. It's a really interesting question.
So I think there's two sides to it. We take everything ceteris paribus, other equal. Of course, the protocols of the major blockchain, Ethereum, leading the way, are moving from proof of work to proof of stake consensus, which is, I think, when we had the Ethereum merge, if I'm right, I think the power consumption associated with processing consensus went down by over 90%. I think Professor Nassim and maybe Alyssa will know more than me about that, but I think it went down over 90%. So I think on the face of it, in terms of layer one blockchains and the increasing use of layer twos, the resources are starting to be used more intelligently and more efficiently. However, I think it's not right to just look at things at face value, because part of what blockchain does is remove intermediaries, gets rid of unnecessary processing and resources used associated with those intermediaries, and has things more streamlined, peer-to-peer, providing trust, providing automation. So if you look at where we can go in the metaverse and with Web3, one of the applications, and again, Prince and Nassim will probably know more than me on this, but one of the applications that hasn't taken off yet, but is going to be one of the killer applications, will be interoperable digital identity, self-sovereign digital identity. Where you're having decentralized IDs and verifiable credentials, and essentially you're able to not have to walk around with paper documents, passports, driver's license, utility bills, and show these paper documents to someone who will then put a tick, which then is represented digitally. But actually, if you look at all the processing we have, and all of it is trustless, right? Everything we do now, you apply for a bank account, you travel, you go to insure your car, you do anything, they don't trust you. So you have to verify and prove who you are and prove you got the credentials to take out a loan or whatever. But when you move to self-sovereign, that all becomes automated, right? You have a zero knowledge proof, you have your credentials which are issued, and you're allowing people to verify them. Now think about what that means for passport control. All of a sudden, you don't need someone checking it, right? Someone can look at your location. You can use biometric facial ID, and you can walk past gates. Same thing could happen at border crossings. The same thing could happen for car rentals. Same thing could happen for loan applications. Same things could happen in retail. So where Web3 is allowed to take off, right? And at the moment, you've got this Victorian paper-based system, which is merging with the digital system, and Web3 can have a whole new system of automation. But when that's allowed to take off, can you imagine the efficiency savings? The amount of paper we'll save, the amount of processing we'll save, the amount of resourcing we'll save. So I believe that Web3, when it's given a chance, can really transform society, the economy, business models, to something that's a lot more efficient, a lot more in terms of energy, a lot more efficient in terms of processing, and something that will benefit the planet. One thing about the metaverse that maybe we miss when we see the goggles is that it has the ability to remove geography or geographic boundaries. So, meaning this, I was asked a question last week. How can we make school trips more efficient? And my answer was, well, if you have immersive technologies, why does someone need to go to school, right? Unless they need to. Meaning, you can use immersive technologies to cut down on the number of trips you need to make, right? Because you don't need to make it. You don't need to fly as much. You don't need to travel as much. We can get out of these routines we have of 9 to 5 working, which COVID is slightly doing. But there are a lot of opportunities to remove geography, which can also bring about relief on our planet. I think the Web3 will start to talk about the more efficient use of resources and traceability. But I believe when you're looking at these two factors, there's a whole new dynamic and paradigm of social, economic, and environmental efficiencies that can be realized.
Thanks for that, David. Elisa has been really patiently waiting because I think she heard the word interoperability and I think she's got a solution for us. Lisa, you're on mute.
Yes, completely agree. The interoperability was one topic I wanted to address, but I also wanted to talk about the fact that having the data that we are generating is not necessarily a minus. To me, it's actually a huge plus because as we are transitioning into the data economy, because right now what other economy is there with the automation being where it is and where it's expected to be, what do people really have anymore except for the data as a way to set themselves apart and potentially participate in the economy outside of any job that they could do? When you think about it, really my vision eventually is to have the data become currency down the line. And so we are producing currency and we should own it, which is why I think the conversation about decentralization and data autonomy should really be paramount with the metaverse, because metaverse is the universe made of data, which we are contributing to and should be able to take advantage from. And of course, the interoperability comes in where we could potentially cut down on the debate of centralized versus decentralized, because every single company, I mean, when you think about it, it's centralized. But the moment you're interacting with other ecosystems, well, that's where decentralization comes in. And that's what we need to realize. And that's where I think Meta has really gone wrong, because it was trying to control the universe, and it really has bitten off more than it could chew. It needs to be a portal into the larger ecosystem rather than trying to control the entire thing.
Thanks, Lisa. It does seem like we do have, like I mentioned when we first started, it's a tension where a lot of people are trying to get in first, and there is always economies of scale and network benefits when you're getting in first, and that's the economics of it. But definitely the concepts around interoperability and the need for us to actually have that history, that body of literature, that body of data, as you mentioned, to stand on is important. And yeah, I like the concept of the metaverse of data, which actually leads us quite nicely into our second question, actually, which is I'm interested in seeing where the threats are. And we've started to look at, well, one of the question that came from the audience was really around, is this too much data that is being created? But as David pointed out, there are efficiencies that are being created. What are some of the other potential threats to building the metaverse today? Is there a sensible way to build it? And are there governance procedures? What are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? What are we missing at this point in time? And we were taking a snapshot right now. David, yourself first, and then we will move to Prof. Nakwi and then Lisa. David, you're on mute.
Sorry. I think we can, if we take a step back and we look at what happened last year, before the Meta announcement, I think if you did internet searches or you looked at the number of internet searches on Metaverse, they were minimal. And then it just exploded, and there was a big hype around Metaverse, and we had statistics, 120 billion invested in the first 5 months of 2022. We had forecasts coming out of 5 trillion in terms of the metaverse opportunity by 2030. And recent studies are looking at about the same amount or increasing it, right? So I think there's a lot of excitement about the opportunity. How can we realize the opportunities? What are the threats to it? I think one of them has been, if you look at it in terms of investment, AI, right? Generative AI, open AI has stolen the headlines this year. I don't think we can deny it in terms of, from Web3 and the metaverse. And you'll start to see some diversion of investment to AI away from the metaverse. I think other sort of barriers you're facing are, you're starting to see headlines of Disney and others and Meta and other companies, shutting down metaverse divisions. Now, we all know that there's macroeconomic factors much outside of that are influencing that. But the headlines are saying that. So when businesses are looking at this, had they looked at it immediately after the Meta announcement, it's like, okay, I need to invest to get into this. I don't want to be, I don't want to miss out. And now it's like, okay, this was a hype. I'm not going to invest in the same way. So I think one of the barriers is investment. And one of the ways, and other barriers, of course, are governments, right? I was having some discussions last week on IP in the metaverse and how we protect intellectual property, the role of governments, how do we have taxation in the metaverse? How does the economy work in the metaverse, right? How does sovereignty work? How do contracts work? All of these things. How do assets work? We talked about, a lot of people. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we talk about, we've talked in the past about, buying land on Decentralised or Sandbox, etc. But what does that mean, right? Because, actually in the real world, the price of property and everything is represented by scarcity, right? The scarcity of supply equals demand equals price. But in the metaverse, you have the possibility of infinite supply. If you can't get the piece of land in Sandbox, then somebody else can make it, etc. So how do economics work? Does that need policy, right, to limit supply and scarcity? Can you register something in the metaverse that's then automatically registered in terms of property in the real world, right? Do you start to get a metaverse property deed if you buy a virtual piece of land, in the real world, or a real world piece of land in the metaverse? Can you get loans on it? Is it an asset, right? If it is, where's the jurisdiction? There's a lot of questions from a policy point of view, which at the moment are going to be barriers to mass investment that need to be resolved. And at the moment, I do not see the government participation in this to the level it needs to be to move very quickly. We have seen in the UK that there has been some work by the UK IPO to start classifying, NFTs and how they can be used and other things in the metaverse. But that's just a sort of positioning paper. So there's a lot of work to do. But what I would say is that the opportunity is massive. So we are looking at 5 trillion by 2030. That is a massive opportunity. And I think that part of what we've got to do is look for real use cases that add value, right? And I think that will be the way to turn all of this around, which is to not make some of the mistakes we made with Web3 and just have these sort of technology-led fantasies that have no user benefit and no business benefit, but really look at where can immersive virtual technologies add value. What can you do with it you can't do now? How does it add value to business? Where's the revenues? And I think if we take that sort of pragmatic business-led approach or value-added approach, that the investment will start to come in. It's a long answer, but again, I think it's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question, and definitely pulling apart some of the motivations for developing the next step is quite important, and you've pulled it apart. I'm going to turn to Professor Naqvi and see his opinions of where the pitfalls and the opportunities are.
Yeah, can I just go back on the data, the question about the data? So the metaverse is going to generate 100 times more data than our current 2D social media platform. So um, when I'm on LinkedIn, LinkedIn owns my data. You cannot download your entire LinkedIn history and take it to Twitter, for example, along with your contacts and your digital influencer status and all that. So when I am on Twitter, Twitter doesn't know where in the room I am looking, or what my heart rate is, or what's the color of my iris, or if I have a slight tremor in my hand. And this is all the information that is going to be generated and captured by these metaverse platforms. So big tech companies will have this data if we are looking at kind of centralized metaverses. So if you think that the social media is kind of radicalized communities, polarized societies, imagine what could happen in 3D environment of metaverse. So the idea is of this decentralized metaverse is to move away from this model to a more stakeholder model, where all parties have equal kind of say, or towards the governance. Um, Now, your question about what are the threats to building a decentralized metaverse, I think it depends who you ask. Centralized tax systems are a threat to decentralization. Legacy systems are a threat to innovation. Email was a threat to postal mail. Amazon was a threat to physical commerce. So I think it depends on who you ask. Um, we have become very used to um, trading our privacy for convenience, and we don't often think about it. And I think discussions like this and technologies like metaverse have actually waken us up to actually think about all these challenges that we have faced in the past, and how to overcome them. Another point I want to make is ill-informed cynics are a big threat to metaverse. um, I spend a lot of time educating policymakers, stakeholders, cynics. Okay, so not skeptics, because skeptics can change their point of view when you present them with evidence. Cynics won't, they never will. And these are the people who told us that blockchain is dead, and crypto is dead, and NFTs are over, and now metaverse is over. So please don't listen to cynics. Do listen to skeptics. Hear their point of views, so see what concerns they have. Because as David said, there are lots of challenges, um, technical challenges, accessibility challenges. Metaverse requires high speed internet, both in terms of latency, bandwidth. There is a lot of work we have to do on digital literacy. um, Privacy and security is a concern. How do we protect users privacy? How do we ensure that the data protection measures are there? Secure identity governance is another one. Some of other speakers touched on that. It Metaverse requires governance structures that are fair, have to prevent any abuse, protect the rights of users. And building such structures is challenging, I think. And it requires collaboration of all stakeholders, not just uh, the technical technicians and the web developers and blockchain developers and metaverse developers, but also what I call quadruple helix innovation ecosystem. So government, enterprises, society, and academia. So all of these in the quadruple helix have to work together. Now, I have no issues with centralized platforms creating digital assets, or avatars or whatever, as long as they are owned and controlled by the users, and the users are able to kind of fully monetize and transfer those assets in open market, what we call self sovereignty. So I think we can accept this as a trade off at this stage. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Professor. It sounds like a lot of the focus that you have are that the threats are the existing threats actually to Web 2 technologies as well. And the core thing about building the Web3 metaverse appears to be for you making sure that we co-build it together with all of the stakeholders. So thank you very much for that. Lisa, what about you from a perhaps more technical perspective?
Well, I think one of the threats to me is to our attention. I'm actually a part of a group that's working with the UN, specifically around what they're calling sustainable yellow economy, or otherwise conscious attention economy. And it's really about the fact of how much time and how much brain power do you really accord any one advertisement, any one experience? Can we do it? Can we afford to? And how difficult is it going to be to reconcile with what we're used to as humans to tolerate? Because the data that we are generating, it's not going to come without a price. And I think we really need to be mindful about creating a kind of stakeholder economy that not just rewards, but also protects people from too much information, well, from information and advertisement overload. What do you trust? It's very permeable, metaverse is. And I think until you can prove out that you are who you are without necessarily revealing your information, so it's more like in a very privacy centric way, proving out that you can be trusted. And until you can limit yourself what it is you want to see, I think you're going to be constantly bombarded and potentially be at risk of changing your shopping habits, your voting habits, or in fact your living habits. And that's dangerous to me.
Thanks, Lisa. It really does. We do have an attention deficit, I think, in the world. I think that I know for a fact that there's a little bit of a disconnect between the 100+ pages that I need to read when the UK, for example, releases a new AI Act for consultation, and the TikTok generation, shall we say? I'm not part of the TikTok generation, but definitely an attention deficit is one of the bigger threats to the metaverse. I'm going to turn again to our little chat that we have here. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. One from Fernando Pereira. What are the main cybersecurity concerns associated with centralized and decentralized systems, and how do these concerns impact one decision to choose one approach over the other? I'm not entirely convinced that we can actually link those concepts together, but that's one of the questions. And Sander has a question. Where does value come from infinite creation? I think that's a response, actually, not a question, to what David was mentioning about the concept of economic scarcity driving a lot of economics in the real world today. But coming back again to Fernando's question, would anyone like to address the very big elephant in the room around cybersecurity?
So I think let me just kind of chip in here. So basically, there will be three broad types of metaverse when it comes to the ecosystems. So you have these public permissionless metaverses, such as Decentralised, Sandbox, and others, and you have users are able to access it. There is data democracy, and and self sovereignty. They connect their blockchain wallet, transact their data, transact their assets, move their assets, create their avatars, build these very public permissionless economies, and so on. So that's the first type. Then you have this public permissioned metaverses, where you need to have some kind of approval to join this public metaverse space, and this approval can be given after you have signed up to, let's say, a subscription, or your identity is verified by some government authority. And we have done a research recently on these types of ecosystems, and we have metaverse Seoul, for example, as an example, or XVRS, the NEOM in Saudi Arabia. They are building this metaverse of a physical city that they are going to build there. And Japan's metaverse economic zones, which is kind of a federated metaverse network. So all the big tech companies coming together. So not one single company, but a federated network providing metaverse services. So you have to look at the cybersecurity and accessibility and data privacy aspects of that when take into consideration that type of metaverse. And then obviously you have your private permissioned metaverses. There's nothing wrong with that. I shouldn't be able to access Pentagon's metaverse or Interpol's metaverse. I think those are there and they have a purpose. And then obviously you have to have access to be granted access to use those types of metaverses. So I think when you look at the security concerns and cyber aspects of metaverses, you have to look at which metaverses are we talking about. It's an important point.
I probably I'll probably chip in on this one as well. So I think the threats will be different, right? So some of the threats we're looking at is how do we offer immersive, interoperable, boundless virtual experiences, associated with businesses and financial products while keeping our critical data safe, right? So it's something about data safety. It's how do we offer this immersive, interoperable, boundless virtual experiences for businesses and consumers while keeping our identity safe, right? So you've got data safe, identity safe. How do we also do this while keeping our devices safe? And how do we do this while keeping our systems safe? Blockchains, Web2, ERP systems, etc. And these are some of the unique threats that we have, along with more profound and more impactful threats, if successful, on things like digital impersonation, right? So at the moment, how do we verify and establish confidence in who we are? The risk of bad actors, deep fake, new types of fraud. All of these will be exaggerated and multiplied in the metaverse. There's some unique threats that come with interoperability. Yeah, and how do we ensure our identity where it works across different virtual worlds? How do we secure the data? How do we secure the value? Where we're taking assets, assumedly in an NFT or other type of token across different worlds. So there's some threats around that, and then there's the threats of account takeover, because account takeover will not be limited in the way it is now. I mean, those of us who have lost email addresses or we've had an account takeover on social media realize how impactful that could be. But what about if that connected to your home or your car or your it could sort of impact you being able to go to work and access certain things in a more profound way. And how do we protect against that account takeover? How do we police it? How do we detect it? And the other one, the big one, is data protection. So we've seen with GDPR, when we look at the internet we're currently in and social media, that GDPR has been all about privacy. But as we've discussed, the data that will be generated in the metaverse will be significantly more than we have now, and we will become data, right? We will become data. It will become a currency. So how do we prevent misuse of that data? How do we protect against the data that's the extra data being generated? How do we protect our privacy? How can we foster trust? We've seen recently, I think this week, Italy have banned ChatGPT for privacy reasons. I think there will be, there's going to be more and more balance needed, to balance the threats, to privacy and security against the sort of rapid development of the metaverse. So those are my points. Hopefully, that they've added a bit to the discussion.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Prof. I think that the security question is always a little bit of a sticky wicket, because you can indeed put in security standards and provisions here and there, but the ability to put them in place is the first one, to have that interoperability that then be enacted. And then, of course, what is security standards without enforcement? How do you actually enforce a lot of these policies is a really, really big question. So I take all of your points, and those are really important for us to be focused on. I was actually going to ask a broader question to round up this discussion around how do you guys think we want to be building the next lab of the metaverse? How should we be building it? What are some best principles or best policies to follow? And I just want to call out HJ, who did start us along this track with the comment that if we're really envisioning decentralization at a global scale, and we're seeing sort of like the new companies suddenly becoming really big, how can we guarantee that these efforts will not roll back into centralization aspects of the current, uh, I guess, way that we're doing things? Because are we simply building the metaverse right now as a digital twin of the systems that we already have in place? So perhaps what I will do is I'll get Professor Nakwi, Elisa, and then David to round up the discussion, uh, telling tell us a little bit. What do you think we should be building? What are some principles you think we should be building the metaverse on?
Okay. I mean, if I may, sorry, Lisa,
No, no,
go
go
first.
ahead.
No, go
No,
ahead,
no.
please. I insist.
Okay. Well, in my case, I think one thing we need to be careful is to remember that we're building our own corners of the metaverse. And so I think right now is the perfect time to experiment and define the best practices, both when it comes to policy, because right now, even with the UN side of things, we are looking for a sandbox policy environment to try out both regulation and innovation, and how regulation may potentially stifle or encourage innovation in this space. But separately, I think it's really to do about creating interoperability between those corners of the universe, and then seeing what works and potentially migrating the best practices onto the other ecosystems. Because right now we are at such a nascent stage that to pigeonhole ourselves is actually a huge threat, not just to innovation, but the way we envision we can move forward. So that would be my next step.
Thank you.
I think I would say education, 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 extremely important. Users should know what they are signing up to. Informed consent is very important. What are their rights? If I'm using a metaverse space, what are my rights? What are my responsibilities as a responsible citizen? Or surely we can put governance mechanisms and content moderation and metaverse safety managers and all those people and structures in place. But I need to, as a responsible citizen, should know what are my responsibilities when I'm using this system. And then how do we build this is kind of looking at a bigger picture. um, I think at a national level, as I mentioned, quadruple helix innovation systems, public private partnerships, make sure that those stakeholders are working in collaboration. National metaverse strategies we have seen in case of Dubai and in case of South Korea and others. So national metaverse roadmaps, national metaverse strategies are going to be very important. Metaverse economic zones. We also have to look at how effective are these metaverses. Are they actually providing value? And the way we can do that is by auditing those services, by evaluation of those programs. And at a national level, you can set up a steering committee to spearhead those metaverse developments, um, identify and support metaverse center of excellence. Education is very important. We have seen more than 2 dozen universities now at least offering some kind of courses at a postgraduate level in universities. So incorporating metaverse education into curriculum is another important step. Social impact of metaverse applications is are they safe, are they effective, are they credible, are they fit for purpose? Because we don't want to be, whether you are a government or whether you are an enterprise or a startup, you don't want to be throwing a lot of money and then finding out 5 years later that actually it didn't work, it actually caused more harm. So I think evaluation of metaverse based applications and programs is important. Interoperability we have discussed, standards and frameworks extremely important. um, and accessibility features, I think, is another important one. when you are thinking about incorporating metaverse, you have to look at, are they accessible for example, for disabled groups, um, and also data privacy, cyber security, as David has alluded to, and finally involve citizens, involve users in the design processes. um, very important to take their feedback, see what's working for them, how they like it, user interfaces. That's going to be a big thing, I think. Whoever is going to design a user friendly UX interface, it doesn't matter decentralized or centralized, if people like it, if they find it easy to access, if they find it safe to use for themselves, for their children, they are going to join those networks and those metaverse spaces. So I think user friendly interfaces are going to be extremely important for adoption of the metaverse.
Thanks, Prof. David.
Yeah, so I'd like to maybe, I'm going to be a bit more controversial here. So one aspect of Web3 and blockchain that I'm really disappointed with is that, you know, the one use case is about money, right? It's about finance. So we when you look at some of the challenges we have in industry to get, you know, blockchain and Web3 adopted, you know, we're always tainted with crypto, right? And crypto, you know, to the broader world is about buying a token, and is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Can I make 10x? You know, am I going to make money out of it? And it's really found that, you know, it's really about finance. And I don't think that was the original vision. I think the original vision was about democracy of assets. It was about, you know, transparency. It was about driving power, you know, to users of Web3. And I think there's a lot of potential in the technology to really make a difference to our environment, make a difference to socioeconomic conditions, to rebalance things, rebalance opportunity. And we haven't seen much of that, right? We've seen the majority of it is, can we get assets on, you know, can we do a lot of what we're doing now? And I think that was the question from the audience. Is it going to make a difference, right? And then, you know, is it going to rebalance things? And if you look at it, you know, a lot of this will come down to what will the economic model underpinning the metaverse be, right? Is it going to be, you know, from a company point of view, maximizing profits, right? Because that's the economic, you know, I did economics. That's the economic models you have for companies. And the economic modeling for people is based on maximizing self-interest. Now, clearly, if you look at this from an environmental point of view, we see the results of that, right? It doesn't balance with the environment. It doesn't balance opportunity. And, you know, as a result, we have 1.7 billion people who do not have access to financial products. Maybe that's improved over COVID, but it's still a significant amount. And you don't have a balanced wealth, right? And the question is, will the metaverse repeat what we have now? Where, you know, especially with AI, if we look at the AI models, you'll know more than me, that, you know, they're based on the people with data, right? So there's a whole, you know, there's a whole section of society and countries that are missing from that, who aren't represented in those AI models because they're not connected. You know, and the AI could perpetuate that. And if AI is key to the metaverse, and you know, and then the metaverse just repeats the models we have now, we could just have an accelerated, immersive model of what we have now. And I think this is where there is an argument for decentralization, because if decentralization is truly about community, and it's about, and the metaverse can remove geography, then actually, you know, access to education, access to financial products, access to having a voice and participating in innovation and global business, you know, could be removed. All those barriers could be removed, and we could actually change things, right? But I think for that to happen, we need to review the economy of the metaverse. What economic principles are we going to have? And I think the question is, if we repeat the economic model we have now, you're going to get the same result, right? And it's just going to repeat what's there. Do we have an opportunity with Web3 to maybe have a more balanced economic model, which takes care of the environment, which can include more people? I would love that, right? Because I think the technology really can make a difference. It can give people, communities a voice. And I would love to see that be the argument for decentralization, not just money.
Thanks, David, and thank you to everybody. We're going to be rounding up the conversation already, and I will be asking our speakers to give one quotable quote that you'd like to leave for the audience, because for all of you who are online, I think that
Man,
we definitely
can I just make one comment? I saw this question from HJ
yes,
about decentralization at a global scale for 8 billion population,
yes,
and it's saying that how can we do this? It won't be possible without involving governments and big techs and centralized companies. Look, even the decentralized systems could become centralized. Okay, so important to understand this, and the other way around. So you can start centralized and then gradually decentralize it. So the answer to, so it's in the fine print, it's in a small print. Okay, so even the DAOs can start as centralized entities. So nothing can be decentralized de novo. Someone needs to develop a certain idea, create it, and found it very centrally, and then of course you can grow, and it can be funded by the community, and they will have tokens and voting rights, and then you can see what those rights are and how much they are. You can then limit the powers of each vote. So even the systems that start decentralized could become centralized. There is a risk there, if there are no checks and balances of what's happening in a DAO, for example. And in the systems that can start centralized could become decentralized, if required. So if it's there in the roadmap. So I think it's important to understand. I just wanted to make the point.
thank you. I think that really is the heart of the issue. Well, like I mentioned, I'm just going to round up our discussion, summarizing this question around centralization and decentralization. So it sounds like question number, is it possible? And I think that the answer is yes. It is definitely a possibility, but there are really big threats to existing issues that are facing Web 2 that we might repeat. Not learning from our mistakes, or we might just be simply replicating the existing structures um, in on the metaverse. I think the second thing that we've discussed, and we can come to a not, I won't say conclusion, but we discussed today, is how to do it is actually a little bit of a challenge, because of the need to look at users and how, for example, they have a attention deficit. There is a trust deficit, which we spoke about. There is also the need for users to have training on doing it. And I always bring up my mother when it comes to this. If you want to put my mother in the metaverse, she's not going to survive, for example. um, there are also technical issues which we will need to work out for interoperability, the governance of it, making sure that all stakeholders are involved. The important thing is also the economy. What exactly is the economy going to look like, and how are we going to be replicating it? And this ties in again right back to the technical aspect of it, because that intellectual property right, that ability for the user, and that individual sovereignty. I believe somebody mentioned individual sovereignty. How is that going to happen? Not just individual sovereignty, but governments are going to talk about jurisdictional national sovereignties as well. All of that is leading to the second bit part that we discussed, which is how do we do this centralization and decentralization part of the metaverse in its next step. That's the second part. And the third thing that I think we discussed is getting better at balance. How exactly do we get better at balancing environment concerns, social economic concerns, inclusion, making sure that the metaverse is all about community? How are we going to be reimagining the idea of geography and all of this? How do we unlock that promise of the metaverse? I think is the third big part that we discussed. I'm going to indeed ask Prof. Nakti, Elisa, David, in that order. What is one quotable quote that you'd like to leave for the audience? And as you think about that, I want to point out to the audience that if you have questions, Luca has just put in the a question bank link in the chat. So if you have questions that we haven't answered, please feel free to drop in your questions there. We will be looking at it and circulating and answering them if you want. But in this order, Prof. Nakti, Elisa, David, what's a quotable quote that you'd like to leave for the audience?
Yeah, thank you. I think what I would like to say is that we find ourselves now at a very critical juncture in the development of internet. Um, in the form of metaverse, we have another unique opportunity to address some of the shortcomings and fix flaws of the internet and Web 2, as we have discussed today. Um, building a decentralized metaverse is our opportunity here in pursuit of this dream. And I think it is a dream worth fighting for. It may appear idealistic, but it's definitely not unrealistic. A vision of a more inclusive, more equitable society. It's definitely not beyond our reach. So I hope that we have more of these discussions, uh, and, uh, and I'm looking forward to building a more fairer and equitable and open internet and Web3.
I like that optimistic view. Alisa.
To me, metaverse is more than a collection of individual ecosystems, and it's more than what the vision that we are already imbuing it with. It doesn't have to be entirely existing in the digital world. And I think we need to be careful not to conflate digital experience with the possibilities of the metaverse. To me, really the first successful metaverse is Amazon and its AWS ecosystem. It can actually span both physical and digital world, and I think we need to work closely in bringing them together.
Thanks, Lisa. David, you have the final say.
Yeah, I think my two panelists have put it very well. First of all, I'll say that the metaverse is a massive opportunity, but it's not a massive opportunity that exists on its own. It's a massive opportunity that brings together Web 2, Web 3, AI, and other technologies to really stretch the boundaries of what we can do, how we can interact, and how we can do business, how we can experience. I think for it to be successful, the balance has to be balanced, and it needs to be in a way that adds value. I think it's very clear now after COVID that we're not going to leave the physical world and go into a virtual world, but actually the worlds need to coexist, right? The virtual world and the physical world needs to coexist, and I think Alyssa was hinting at that earlier. I think, is the metaverse AI on Earth? Meaning, there's been a lot of talk about generative AI and open AI, and the fact it's going to replace 300 million jobs, etc. For AI to have an impact and replace jobs in call centers and jobs elsewhere, it will need the metaverse to be that physical present, that physical persona, and provide the physical environment for those things to happen. So I think AI and the metaverse are going to be two things we hear a lot about in the coming months and years. The metaverse providing the immersive technology, and the pairing need to automate with AI. But I think Web3 is the ecosystem, right? Web3 is the community, it's the automation engine, it's the governance. And I think these things will come together going forward. My last words would be, we've heard about a 5 trillion opportunity by 2030. Some are taking it by 2035 as high as 10, 15 trillion. But for this to happen, it's not people at home in XR goggles playing games and having fun. This will need to replace supply chains, retail, wholesale, core parts of our economy. And for that to happen, there's a lot of development needed. Some of it in our side in terms of connectivity, some of it in terms of how you access the metaverse. It's not going to be through goggles. It needs to be through phones or in a practical way that everyone can have equal access. But then the applications on it need to be built. So in a way, it's infrastructure. And not only do the applications need to be built, but we need to have fair access, right? Everybody needs to have fair access. We need to have redistribution. So I think there's a lot of thinking needed at the infrastructure, governmental governance layers. But I think the overriding thing is that it's an exciting time. It's going to happen. It's going to be the next iteration of the internet, and it's going to be a massive opportunity. But what we're seeing now is the working our way through that evolution. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Indeed, we definitely are working our way through. I love the fact that we're not too disillusioned or disenchanted quite yet of the opportunities. And I would like to thank all the participants as well as my three panelists. Thank you very much for joining us. We are already 4 minutes over time, so I will let all of you go. Thank you very much. Have a really good Easter for those of you observing. If not, have a really good, wonderful weekend. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.